Julie Siddiqi, you're co-founder of Nisa-Nashim, the Jewish and Muslim Women's Network. What do you think is the impact of the coronavirus on particularly Muslim belief and observance, both now and in the future?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it's been difficult. You know, it's been something that none of us were really, I guess, expecting, and it's very difficult to prepare for. So I think it has really significantly impacted all of us, I guess, when it comes to things like worship and sort of, you know, the practices and the work that normally happens in mosques. Of course, that's been very, very seriously affected. And I think at least in the first week after the sort of official time when we were said not to gather, etc., I think mosques genuinely found it very difficult to know what to do, because the advice was still not sort of absolute. And so there was some, I guess for some people it felt ambiguity about what to do. So I know some mosques really struggled on that first Friday. And then I think there was quite a serious kind of backlash from some Muslims to say to mosques, look, you have no choice but to do this. You know, this is really important that we all cooperate with each other and look after each other and make sure that we keep safe. So you have to close. There was kind of some toing and froing there, but only because people feel very attached to their daily prayers or their Friday prayers within a mosque. And so I can understand it was tricky. But thankfully that settled down, I think, quite quickly. And thereafter, by the second Friday, pretty much all of the mosques were closed. And then of course it's about thinking how to sort of do other things and to still keep your own private and also communal kind of worship going, really.
Was there a generational difference in terms of the reaction to government policy?
Possibly. I think what was quite interesting was that there are lots of Muslim doctors, lots of them. And so actually they kind of seem to get involved as well and say, look, from a medical perspective, from an NHS perspective, it's crucial that we all cooperate with this and, you know, try and somehow make this work, difficult as it is. So I think that was an interesting sort of crossover for me with people who know what the medical position is, saying to people who otherwise are trying to navigate these sometimes difficult community spaces, we really have no choice. It's not safe anymore. And so I think maybe there was a generational element there, but I know there was a mix of people who were really feeling quite protective over the mosque prayer spaces. And to an extent, I can understand it. Of course, you know, these are not normal circumstances. So it was interesting to see people using examples from the time of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, both ways, in fact, and trying to sort of use that as examples of what we should and shouldn't be doing, which I always find interesting because, of course, we're talking about something in very different times, but at the same time, the way we practice and the way we do things is obviously the same and very similar. So I found that some of that quite interesting.
What examples are you talking about? It would be interesting to hear one or two specific examples, perhaps from the life of the Prophet Muhammad, or one or two examples from the Quran, and how that might be understood today to help Muslims in grappling with the implications.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's been interesting is when we talk about things like plague and how that plays out, because of course, in a way, that is what we're talking about now is like a plague. And it's only really been in the last couple of weeks that I've actually really seen it like that. And I find it quite interesting. And even when we were having some conversations around Passover and what it means to be in a plague now, it was very, very interesting. But there are definitely times when the people were advised not to come to the mosque. And so it's about trying to be sensible about that, even in, if you like, peacetime, even in when things are relatively normal. And for example, there's really, really extreme weather. There is definitely precedent there for people to not have to come to the mosque. You know, attending the mosque is a very interesting one. And especially for me, actually speaking from a woman's perspective, of course, for women, even in Britain, there is often a case for us not actually coming to the mosque because maybe there's no space for us to pray. So while I didn't want to get that kind of conversation too mixed up in this serious situation we find ourselves in, I don't think it can be ignored either. And I think one of the things that I would like to see would be for people to really think and rethink now that the mosques are closed and we're managing somehow in different ways. Are there different ways that we need to, engage with our communities? How can we do that now in the age of technology? And how can we make sure that people feel included? I think it could be an interesting stop, pause, rethink about some of that as well right now.
That's a very interesting point about the role of Muslim women, because religion and faith has been brought into the home for most people. And of course, it does it balance out the genders a bit? Because we often hear that it's not such an easy thing for a Muslim woman to be a leader of a community. And maybe you can put me right there, but that's often what we hear. But now, since things have been brought back into the home, is there a privatization of religion that gives particularly Muslim, but not only Muslim, perhaps Jewish and Christian women as well, an opportunity to assert their leadership potential in a way that perhaps they haven't been able to do before?
Yeah, I mean, quite possibly. I think there would be interesting dynamics happening in the homes, and it's definitely something that I want to explore a bit more over the coming weeks, particularly with Muslim women, because I mean, I couldn't resist when we first realized the mosques were going to close. I couldn't resist putting on my own social media, maybe we as women tell the men in our families that there isn't enough space for them to pray in the home, and see what the reaction is. I didn't want to belittle what is a very serious situation, but I just wanted people to think about it in a way that maybe they hadn't up to now, particularly men who are used to just going to the mosque, doing their prayers, coming home, and never really having to think about what the situation is maybe for others. So I couldn't resist that at the beginning, and so I did talk about that a bit, and it got a very good, very funny reaction by many people actually, which was really great to see that. I think each family is different, but I think there's definitely an opportunity maybe for people to think about family, discussions, family circles, family prayers, where people worship and do things together. I think there's definitely more scope for that. I think there's also, it's a challenge. It's challenging for people to suddenly, perhaps if they're in quite a small space, how do you find your own place within that to pray physically? Where do you pray? How do you do that? How do you sort of find a place of calm and connection with God among what might be quite chaotic environments with lots of young children or whatever, none of them going to school? So I think everyone has a way they have to try and navigate this. I think what's always interesting for me as a Muslim is that Islam is very much a personal faith, very much one-to-one with God, while also at the same time being very communal as well. And I think that all of those parts of it are coming into play right now, maybe in new ways, maybe in challenging ways, maybe in difficult ways. But you almost can't escape yourself at the moment. And so people are having to really think about how to sit with themselves, how to feel good about their own company, while also dealing with difficulties within families, etc. And of course, loss of loved ones and all of that is really tough. So I think it can be a way of digging deep in a way that we weren't expecting. And I've certainly found the sort of slowing down and the calmness of it really very, very, I'm really appreciating that, and making us all stop a bit rather than running on 100 miles an hour in the way that we normally do. I think that aspect of it actually will be good for all of us in the end, even though at the moment we may not be able to see it.
Well, we're bringing this conversation to a close, but I know that the viewers would be interested to have your views on Ramadan. I mean, April's unusual. We're celebrating Passover. Christians are celebrating Easter. And Muslims are looking forwards and maybe when they watch this about to celebrate Ramadan. Now, we're speaking a couple of weeks ahead of Ramadan, but how do you think it can be celebrated, assuming we are still in this lockdown?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's going to be interesting. I actually really feel for my Jewish and Christian friends at the moment who are very much used to a very communal side of their worship through these next couple of weeks in particular. So I really feel for people that are having to find different and new ways of doing that, maybe even on their own, when normally they would never be on their own. I think that's quite hard. I think in Ramadan, again, Ramadan is a very, very personal time of reflection and asking for forgiveness, connecting with God. reconnecting with the Quran. But there is, I guess, a family or communal element to it. But I think that actually, in terms of a way of being, it tends to be very personal anyway. So actually to sort of be in your own home, maybe, and not going to work and having a different routine, no school runs to do, etc., I think might actually go in the favor of Ramadan, in the sense that we all have to be home-based anyway, because it is a very personal time. Having said that, of course, things like iftars with other communities, iftars in mosques, people, mosques tend to have iftar, for, the collective meal that we use to break our fast every day for people to go if they're on their own or they don't have family. That side of it is going to be missing. And I think we just need to be careful to look after people who may be on their own, because that's quite hard. It's one thing to sort of feel that Ramadan is a personal reflective time, but to be forced to be on your own and have no choice, I think is hard. So I think what will happen is people will give food to each other, use maybe clever technology to feel still connected in the way that I've seen synagogues and others doing. I think we can be smart about, whoever knew that Zoom would be such a blessed thing for us. I don't think any of us ever thought that, and people who set it up in the first place probably never imagined that it would be used in the way that it has been now. And I've seen some great things. So I hope that people find comfort in the personal aspect of Ramadan, and if they are feeling lonely, they can find ways to reach out to others.
Julie Siddiqi, thank you very much.
Thank you.